I would like to welcome you to Koi Beginner. What we'll be talking about today is buying new koi. And if you're a beginner, ostensibly you would not probably know exactly what kind of koi are available. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Not necessarily where to buy them, but the kind of fish that you could actually get. Koi occur across the range. There's probably 5 different kinds of koi, and I'll go through them all, but you'll kind of get an idea where you should probably be. There's koi that are actually sold as bait fish by some people. They're sold by the bucket, and the quality of those fish is extremely low. The health of the fish is usually equally low because they're handled terribly, not as pets, but just basically bass food. Those aren't available everywhere, and you won't find them at most pet stores, but sometimes you do. They would be sold, 5 for $1 or something like that because they're so horrendous looking, and they won't usually grow up into very pretty fish. The second kind of fish is a very common domestic fish, and they're sold, for example, at like a PetSmart or a Walmart or something like that. Those koi really aren't actually terrible. Some of them are fairly pretty, so if you look at them long enough, you'll probably find some that are quite nice. I think a lot of beginners enjoy a bright yellow fish. I think you can get those a lot of places like that, but those fish are probably never going to be beauties, the kind of fish that anyone further along in the hobby would really envy. But I don't mean to be snobbish. Those would be great to start with because they're usually pretty affordable. And then if you have some of the early beginner fails, you hadn't lost anything particularly expensive. So that's something to consider. So that would be like pet chain, large pet store, just kind of a run of the mill, get them in, get them out sort of a fish. Then there's 2 other categories. If you went to like a specialty shop, like a pet store that actually specialized in koi or something, you probably would find a lot of better domestic fish that looked, like certain patterns that you'd recognize in books. And then you could also find probably a low-end imported koi, a Japanese or Vietnamese or Taiwan type of koi at a fairly reasonable price. And you might go, well, what's a reasonable price? Why don't you tell me what I should be paying about? Well, bait fish, forget it. Um, Domestic fish that you would find at a chain should be $12, maybe less. I wouldn't pay more than that for a fish of the quality that they would sell at, a pet bazaar, Wonder Market is, wall to wall cheap. So you figure, I don't know, $12 tops on those. If you go to a specialty store that actually has decent hand selected domestic, or some nice imported fish, they would be Japanese or from Taiwan or Vietnam. Those should be, for the domestic hand selected, those should be probably 25 to 50 for a fish that's 6-8 inches long. The imports should be probably 20 to 50% higher than that. So for a very small import fish, you'd figure $25. For a larger import fish, say 8, 12 inches, something like that, it could get into the hundreds. Then there's the final category of fish, and those are show quality fish. Those are the ones that were sent from Japan. Typically, would be the best place to get a show quality fish. Typically imported from Japan by a guy or gal who really knows their fish, picked it by hand, looked at it, said, yeah, that's a good fish for show. Would be sold in a smallish group, and probably would cost you $400 or $500 for a fish around 8, 12 inches long. Most of the really knowledgeable people who deal in fish that high end can tell you. There's a guy named Ray Abel. I don't know if he still does fish anymore. I think it's Abel Koi. That guy can look at a fish and he'll tell you, he'll say this color is going to do this, and this color is going to come out here, and this red's going away, and just amazing. But everything Ray Abel looks at, he can usually tell you if it's going to be good or not. And there's been other guys too. A guy named Gary Cryer up in Oklahoma. He's a filter guy, but he just knows the fish. It's a skill, a natural talent of his. Um, and then sometimes, there's people that import koi and they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they'll tell you whatever you want to know. They'll say, so what were you looking for? Black and white? No, yeah, this one will end up black and white. All that red will go away. So, I think reputation, word of mouth, has a lot to do with it. And then, of course, price. Let me tell you one more thing about picking out fish as a beginner. If the fish has a bunch of flecks and specks on it, it's probably not that good. What you're looking for in a fish that's a collector type is going to be like big primary colors. Like, never hurts to have a solid yellow fish. Never hurts to have a solid orange fish. Never hurts to have a fish with shiny scales on it, almost regardless of pattern. That's called Jinrin. And just a whole mess of little tin-looking scales on it. Real pretty. But when you're looking at fish that have colors to them, what you're looking for is a fish that looks like it was painted with broad strokes by a kid. So it would be like a basic red fish with big black marks on it, not little tiny spatters. You don't want spattered colors. You want big strokes of color. And you want the colors to be really what they're supposed to be. Like in the red, you want the red to be really red. And with the white, you want to be really white. Black, really black. So that's kind of good advice. Just bright primary colors, look like they were painted by a little kid in fish that you're getting, or go with solid colors. But you just don't want them to be blotchy or spattered. Not so much. So anyway, that's sort of a primer on getting fish. I personally, for a beginner, would recommend a low-end domestic fish. I would try to get fish that are pretty, because you're going to fall in love with them, and you're not going to want to get rid of them just because they're ugly later. So I would get the prettiest low-end domestic that you can get. And a lot of times if you have a koi club, you can ask them, where are the low-end domestic fish, the pretty but affordable domestic fish. They'll usually be able to tell you, although sometimes the koi clubs, they'll be like, oh, but don't do business with that guy. He sells hack domestic fish. There's a certain snobbery, but you can see past it. So that's all for this particular video installment. It's basically orienting you to the approximate prices. If you had a pen and paper handy, I hope you wrote them down. What you could kind of expect to pay for various quality of fish. In Koivet.com, I'm planning an article that actually shows you, what really crappy fish look like, and sort of good fish, and pretty good fish, and then really good fish, and then show quality fish. You can usually tell the difference by looking at them. So that's all for today. YouTube has a tendency to cut off the last minute of your video, so when the screen blacks, you'll see nothing but gray, assuming that the video gets cut off at the right place. So I'm going to let it run another minute, and but when the screen covers, then you know the video's over. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.